What's up, guys? Welcome to Formula One Lifting Coast. My name is Sean. Thanks for being here. We are complete with the 2026 preseason testing. It's been a little bit of a weird preseason, just to be honest with you. The first Barcelona test, which we spoke after the Barcelona test last time, that was the last time we spoke. They only showed us highlights, and it was supposed to not be televised. Then they put together, little 10-minute YouTube clip packages for us to take a look at, which was, cool, better than nothing. Teams didn't want to fall flat on their face in front of the whole world. So it makes some sense as to why they didn't televise that. Then the second preseason test of 2026 was at Bahrain, which we're accustomed to, and they only televised the last hour of running each day, which was incredibly weird. It was something that they were, I guess, planning to do all along. I didn't hear about it till like a week out that they weren't doing that. So I actually took time off work. I was planning on camping out in front of the TV and watching a lot of testing. And then lo and behold, they only aired an hour of it. So it was a little bit of a letdown. I still enjoyed the time off. But then this past week, we had the actual typical preseason testing where it's long sessions in the morning, long sessions in the evenings. You had Jake C and Joe Lynn on commentary. You had Crofty and Anthony Davidson. It was great. So we got a really good look at the cars for a long while. We got to see multiple drivers run in the same car, which is really good for a frame of reference. So we have a lot of news. There's about a million things to dive into. We won't go through a million things today, but I wanted to hit a couple of the high points. And let's start with Aston Martin. Start negative and work our way to the positive. Aston is astonishingly slow. They are astonishingly slow. They just, it's been a huge letdown for Aston Martin, I know. What's funny is there are some brilliant F1 pundits, if you will, some world-class journalists and people that have been covering Formula One forever they were loud wrong on this Aston Martin thing. We all kind of mentioned at Barcelona, hey, they only showed up for like a little while on Thursday, ran 4 laps, car stopped. Then they ran Friday and did 60 laps, but they were gone the whole week. Oh, no, it's no big deal. It's just a shakedown. They don't need to be there the whole time. That's what we were told by a lot of the experts. And then the second we go to the actual Bahrain test, Aston's way off the pace, like back with Cadillac, like at the very, very back of the grid. Cadillac's a brand new team. So, but all we heard was Adrian Newey has built a rocket ship. And it turns out that's not the case, not this year anyway. Spanners, my hero over on Missed Apex, he said it best. He said, when there's a new formula and somebody creates a car that's entirely different than everything else, it's really cool looking, it's different than everything else, he says it's usually pretty bad. It's usually pretty slow. And that's not wrong. In this case, especially if you think back to the Mercedes Zero Pods, that car looked like the future. It looked like a UFO or something with the no side pods. And it was terrible. It was like a 90s rap music video. Car was just bouncing down the track, going really slow. It was terrible. So you do see that from time to time. You remember the scalloped side pods of the Ferrari. That one wasn't that bad. I remember the asymmetrical front end on one of the cars in 2014. So sometimes different is good. You want to be innovative, creative, come up with things that your competitors didn't come up with. But sometimes that's just it. There's, if you're too far off the beaten path, there might be a reason. And Aston really does look like that's the case with them this year. Unfortunately, they had. I started to have concerns about Aston last year. They just made so many key leadership changes at like a high level, and it's like part of me you have to have grace with Aston, right? They didn't know. I guess like the beginning of the season 2024, they didn't know, hey, Adrian Newey next year this time will be available as a free agent. And so for a team like Aston, if you have the opportunity to acquire Adrian Newey and add him to your team, like of course you do it. Of course you do it. But they had already made so many structural changes. There was, just so many different Andy Cowell. You had Whitmarsh. You had all these different key players in these different spots, and kind of everything had to be reshuffled because if you're going to hire Adrian Newey and you're going to hold him accountable for the team's success in terms of the car's performance, then he's got to be allowed to make some adjustments with the teammates, the people that he's working with and the people that he hires. And so we heard within the last 6 months, Adrian Newey had let go of something like 6 or 7 engineers from Aston Martin. So that was difficult. We heard there were wind tunnel correlation issues, which is to be expected. Anytime you have a brand new wind tunnel, there's going to be some teething issues. And then the biggest shock to me, and I didn't know this, maybe you did, I didn't realize that when they partnered with Honda to essentially be the Aston Martin Honda factory Formula One team, I didn't realize that due to like organizational philosophy that Honda was going to largely switch their staff that work on the power unit. I mean, this is a 1.6 liter V6 turbo hybrid power unit. I just didn't think that was going to be a totally different group of people working on this car than just worked on the power units that they supplied to Red Bull. And apparently that is somewhat of a company philosophy. They like to, when they start a new project, I guess they bring in a lot of new people. But also, I think Red Bull hired away some key talent from Honda's power unit team and has them working at a Red Bull Ford powertrains now. So that was interesting and kind of, like I said, news to me, just because simply I didn't realize we were going to have that big a switch in personnel. And it feels like there's a combination of issues going on at Aston. Like the power unit is still in its infancy, apparently. Apparently it's heavy. The power unit itself is heavy. In addition to that, they have a car that is lots of systems aren't coming online and things aren't working the right way. So there's a lot to do. And it's unfortunate. I almost feel bad for Fernando Alonso at this point. I've never been the biggest Alonso fan, but there's no doubting the fact that he is one of the most talented human beings to ever drive a car. And the fact that they're going to go through this massive uphill climb in what right now I think is scheduled to be his last season with Aston Martin. Now, he may re-sign for another year. Or he may go running the other direction at the end of the season. We'll see how it goes. But it is a bit unfortunate because it looks like they're in for a tough year. I did hear Megan Schuster over on The Ringer. She said, and she was kidding, but kind of serious. She's like, listen, if we can't see Fernando competing for podiums and wins, it would almost be better if the car was really bad, because that's an entertaining Fernando because he kind of says whatever's on his mind. And I tend to agree. It's going to be an interesting season. So hopefully we get lots of team radio. Hopefully, especially with this being a new regulation set, there could be a lot of progress made really quickly and early on in the season. Just to give you some reference, so like Mercedes, of course, there's 4 Mercedes powered cars, right? So that's Alpine, Williams, McLaren, and Mercedes. They're all running Mercedes power units. They did a total of 1,554 laps over the Bahrain testing. Ferrari has three different teams running it, so they did 994. Red Bull powertrains, they have 2 teams, 736 laps. Audi has 1 power unit in 1 team. It's the Audi team. And that's it. And they did 357 laps. That is a brand new power unit. And of course, the car is being built at the Sauber facility. What was the Sauber facility? So Audi has 357. Honda has 128. 128 laps. Like, is that 2 race distances or a little more, a little less, give or take? So it's going to be a long season. Aston is like, Aston Martin team personnel were saying all year last year, it'll be 27 before we're fighting for podiums regularly. You never know if that's just them downplaying what their potential is. But when that wild-looking car came out at Barcelona a few weeks ago, you had journalists go, Adrian Newey's built a spaceship. And that's simply not the case. He might have, but the car between his power unit, and I would guess there's probably some aerodynamic development that needs to happen too. And then the third leg of the of the stool that we're not even talking about here is just the fact that uh, they have to have their own fuel made, and so who knows how much impact utilizing the actual race fuel. It's a man-made synthetic fuel, so that may impact their running. You can't get too worked up about any one of these things, but when all three of them are off the mark, it does look like they're going to be fighting at the back of the grid for trying to stay out of last place, try to stay out of 11th place. And this was one of the fears the teams had about bringing in a new team, because what if you bring in a brand new Formula One team and they beat you to 10th? And you're the 11th team. That's something that all of the existing Formula One teams were vocal about. But you have to have patience, of course. And I feel like McLaren, Formula One fans that love Aston or that want to love Aston, I know a lot of people that really want to be Aston Martin fans. They're not there yet. They have to be patient. And I know it feels like everybody's been patient. Well, it kind of starts all over again, because you can't just look at Adrian Newey and say, okay, you got your people in, you fired who you wanted to fire, you've hired who you wanted to hire, go get him, now you start winning. He still has to be allowed to make further adjustments. The nearest example I can think of was McLaren. McLaren went through the doldrums, right? They went through this terrible season of time. They hired Zak Brown. Zak Brown wasn't like the magic man who fixed everything. He's very good at fundraising, and he's very good at listening to key personnel and having good key personnel in specific spots. So Zak Brown set a structure in place. He was working on getting sponsors, so they had dollars. He was addressing the financial needs of the team, and he was simply trying to set them up for success. And they did well. If you remember, back in 20 and 21, in the two reg sets ago, remember Danny Rick won Monza. Lando got his first podium. We started seeing the team make progress, and then the regulations changed for 22, that 22 through 25, those seasons, and McLaren dropped back down the grid. And so Zak Brown had to come back in and make further changes to McLaren to get them up to par, to where they needed to be. And he made additional changes. I was having a conversation on the app formerly known as Twitter with Sammy Sage from Late Breaking Podcast. Amazing. Sam's a really talented guy. He's very good at finding the interesting in Formula One topics, and he's very good at he himself being interesting. And he was openly critical after James Keys had been let go. Andreas Seidel had been allowed to move over to Audi kind of without going through his gardening leave. So McLaren was making some key changes in 21, 22, 22. And Sam was critical. He's like, why is, Zak Brown doesn't have it figured out. McLaren's in a bad spot. And I tweeted back, because I use a lot of words. I did like 6 tweets in a row. And I was just like, Sam, you might be right. I don't want to disagree with you, because if I do, I'm usually wrong. But I said Zak has to be allowed, Mr. Brown has to be allowed to set a structure in place, let it start working, and then make further adjustments. You can't tell him he has to pick day one the org chart and what it's going to look like for the next 5 years. There's going to need to be further adjustments. And to his credit, Sam was like, no, Sean, I hear you. You're right. That's a good point. We'll keep an eye on it, see how they go. And then, of course, it all turned out working. Worked pretty well for McLaren. They got 2 Constructors' World titles in a row. Lando, of course, won the Drivers' World title last year. So it was exciting. We have a similar hope for Aston. If you're an Aston fan, or if you know an Aston fan, I like seeing more teams be good. And so it would be exciting to see them be good, but it's going to be a little while. They are astonishingly slow. Very slow. All right. Second piece of info, Ferrari, like in better news, good news. Ferrari's on it. Ferrari is freaking on it. Like, I know this happens every year in preseason. Ferrari does really good, impresses everybody, and then they find a way to let everyone down. The Tifosi get let down. Listen, Ferrari is, they have made some key compromises, from what we understand, regarding the size of their turbo. So the way that the power units work, the turbo part of the power unit has to spool up over time before it adds horsepower to the engine, before it can recharge, before it can do all of its turbo-ness. It needs to spool up first. We used to have this device called the MGU-H that did that. It was very expensive. not road relevant, and it was a barrier to entry for additional factory teams to come into the sport. So they did away with the MGUH, and they don't have that anymore. So what Ferrari did is they built their power unit with a smaller turbo that spools up quicker. So this should theoretically give them more pace, especially at the low end. This should be very beneficial coming out of slow speed corners. This should be beneficial in traction zones. This should be really beneficial at race starts. And in fact, so far, so good for Ferrari. What we've seen has been very impressive. Now, I heard they were playing around with their gearing so that they wouldn't lose too much top end, because if you have a small turbo and it helps you out on the low end, great. It means you're going to sacrifice potentially some top end. So they're playing around with their gearing to see if they can make sure they have enough shove near the high end of the vehicle's speed range so that they can still have some shove when they get up there to the high speeds. But right now, it looks really good. I heard all week after the first Bahrain test, the car looks better in Charles Leclerc's hands. It looks really good when Charles is driving it. Doesn't look good when Lewis is driving it. I couldn't make that determination with integrity because, not that I'm an expert on driving, but I got to see Charles run about 25, 30 laps, and Lewis only ran, because they only gave us an hour each day after that first Bahrain test, that they only gave us an hour each day of viewability. So I only got to see Lewis Hamilton do like 4 or 5 laps. So while those 4 or 5 laps didn't look great, I was having a really hard time making a determination that like the car looks better in one guy's hands versus another. It was just simply not enough of a sample size to be able to give any kind of input. Then when we come to last week's test in Bahrain, I thought Lewis looked really good. He looked excited. He looked energized. He's an excellent race car driver. He's very, very fast. For anybody that thinks he's not, that's okay. You're allowed to be wrong, but it's wrong. The issue isn't whether or not Lewis is fast. Is he as fast as his teammate? And that's going to be the big question. But man, what I would give to see just like a good, even fight between the two of them. I would love to see Ferrari, and I am not a Ferrari fan at all. I love the Tifosi. The Tifosi are my favorite fan base, 100%. The UK fans are the most astute fans, right? Like, I love American fans are excited about a lot of stuff. Like, there's great fans all over the world. I love that when a Ferrari driver wins Monza, that may be one of the best scenes in all of motorsport. It's fantastic. So for the Tifosi, I want them to be good. Remember, it's been since 2007 when Kimi Räikkönen won the title. Ferrari has not really even been in the title conversation. There was that 2018-2019 season, or 2017-2018. Then they had the fuel flow meter allegedly issue on 2019. 2020, they were nowhere. So I would love to see Ferrari have a chance to. They started off the season really good in 22, but then they quickly fell away and Red Bull dominated. So it'd be really neat to see Ferrari pushing the pace and racing at the front. I think most people are saying that like Mercedes is the front runner. Mercedes could be sandbagging. I don't think we won't know until quali in Melbourne. And even then, when we go to China or Japan, those tracks are so different that we may even see horses for courses, right? We may see some cars do really well on certain tracks and then other cars do really well on other tracks, which would be exciting. So I'm hoping for that. But I would say it's Mercedes and Ferrari. And then I would put McLaren and Red Bull in the top 4 as well. Now, again, McLaren, what we're being told is the factory teams have a distinct advantage this year because they've had more time with their hands on the power unit. They understand how the power unit works. It's more complex. Remember, 50% roughly combustion power, 50% roughly battery power, electric power. And that is going to, as much as the way your car is built, it's going to be really important, especially early in the season, just knowing when to deploy the battery, when to recharge the battery, using the power unit the right way. But with all that said, Lando and Oscar were up at the top in times. They looked really good. I mean, they looked like McLaren. So I don't have any reason to think they won't be good. I just believe if the factory teams do have an advantage, that would make sense to me. And I've heard that several times this preseason. And then Red Bull, maybe the biggest bright spot of the year. Again, if you're a Red Bull fan, it's awesome for you. They built their own power unit for the first time, and they look to have really done a good job. Like, it's really good. Apparently, they hired a bunch of people from Honda. They hired some people from Mercedes, from Ferrari. They put them together in Milton Keynes, and they have built a very, very appropriate power unit for this particular regulation set. Now, we'll see what it looks like come race time. We'll see what it looks like in quali. Max, of course, we all know is electrifying. So it could be really good news for Red Bull, or at least it's not bad news at all. They're going to be competitive, it looks like. So obviously, that durability notwithstanding, longevity of the power unit notwithstanding, like we don't know, these things could blow up after 3 races or something, and so we'll be learning at the same pace. But those those 4 teams seem to be set apart a little bit. Like they look. It's the same big 4 from last year, so that's exciting. But we're not 100% sure what exactly to expect. I talked a little bit about race starts. There was a lot of talk about safety with the race starts. So again, when the cars line up on the grid, they have to rev the power unit. They have to rev the combustion engine really high to get the turbo to start spinning, so that when the red light sequence starts, they can take off and they can get away from the line quickly. Well, if you're at the back of the grid and you only have a few seconds to rev your engine, that's a big disadvantage, because it's taking as many as 10 seconds, 15 seconds to get the turbo spooled up. So you rev, you go up to 9,000 RPMs. I'm making up numbers. You go up to 9,000 RPMs, and then the red light sequence stops. It starts. You let off the revs. You drop down to that 2,500, 3,000, wherever you need to be to get off the line. Pop into first gear, and you let the clutch out and start going. So you need the turbo spooled up before you take off. So they were worried about some teams just not having enough time to do that and getting run over potentially by a team behind them that maybe has a little bit better of a car for getting off the line or whatnot. Well, they decided to add 5 seconds to the start procedure. So they're going to give everybody an extra 5 seconds, but that's only fair because if Ferrari built their car, and Ferrari and Haas and potentially Cadillac have an advantage off the race start because they have a power unit that takes advantage and took these rules into mind, and they built it the right way, they shouldn't have to give that advantage up just because everybody else is bummed out about it. Is this going to help with safety? I don't know. There's been some other safety talk too, like they won't start the race in straight line mode. They're going to start with the wings closed so that they have extra downforce for jockeying position and changing directions early in the race. So we'll see if that indeed happens. Compression ratio. So we had this big conversation about compression ratio. Everybody is worried that Mercedes is going to just blow everybody's doors off once the season starts. And I guess that could happen. It's happened before. There is a FIA rule that says the compression ratio needs to be 16.0 to 1. Okay. It didn't say when that measurement will be taken. Okay, so it didn't make that clear. So Mercedes last year went to the FIA and said, hey, can you tell us where this temperature, where this check of compression ratio will happen? And they're like, well, it'll happen in the garage at ambient temperature, like it always has. Said, well, can you write that in the rules? Because it doesn't say that. And by the way, WEC, Rally, Formula 2, and one maybe MotoGP, anywhere in any FIA governed motorsport that I can find where the FIA outlines the compression ratio necessities of the car or the machine in that competition, it says it will be tested at ambient temperatures. So they just added that language in to the Formula One to make it uniform with all their other sports that they govern, and to give Mercedes and other teams clear direction on when are you going to test this compression ratio. So they agreed they would be tested at ambient. Well, then it became known to the other teams that Mercedes has something in their engine that allows the compression ratio to increase as it heats up to race temperature, which means more compression ratio for the purposes of this conversation, the better, right? They're going to have more horsepower. Okay, so now the teams want it tested when it's hot, and that is supposed to take place starting August 1st. But there's a catch. The catch is that it says the car has to be compliant with the compression ratio 16.0 to 1 at all times. So they want to test it at ambient temperatures cold, and they want to test it at race temperatures hot. So the teams that were upset with Mercedes for only wanting to test it cold, well, apparently they only want it tested hot. They don't want the cold measurement. So I guess this could technically all still fall apart and everything goes back to the way that it was. So literally all the conversations about compression ratio may be for naught, because the other teams may have a vested interest in not wanting to take the cold temperature test. So I don't know. It's changed like 3 times. Nonetheless, nothing will change before August 1st. We'll keep you posted as we find out more information. All right, so let me conclude today by talking a little bit about energy deployment. So like I said, we're not going to have DRS anymore. The wings will open and close, but remember that's uniform across the board now. So every team will be allowed to open and close their wings, have to open and close their wings at the same point on the track. Okay, so that is not something you have to earn the way you used to have to earn DRS. Remember, you had to be within a second of the car in front of you during a detection point in order to open the wing and get the drag reduction benefit. Now that's gone away. They are all utilizing the movable aerodynamics at the same time. So is there an overtaking aid? And the answer is yes. Anthony Davidson did a really good job. He's wonderful. He did a really good job explaining this. And I'm just going to go over how overtake mode kind of is supposed to work. These parameters are still all subject to change because they will throttle the battery up or down. They will allow them to deploy more or less electrical energy depending on what the racing looks like, right? You don't want it to. So the issue with these cars is, just long and short, they have plenty of horsepower. They are incredibly exciting to watch, and they're a lot of fun. The issue is, because half of the power comes from, nearly half of the power comes from electrical energy, they simply don't have enough electricity to deploy around the whole lap. So you get this wonderful 470 extra horsepower when you deploy the battery. The problem is you can't use it the entire time because you just run out. And so the battery is really small. It's meant to recharge quickly and discharge quickly, recharge quickly, and then be deployed quickly. So you're still operating mostly with the combustion engine throughout the course of a lap. However, there is a button called the overtake. There is a button called the boost button. So what the drivers will do, essentially, they'll be driving the car. It'll have over 500 horsepower with the combustion engine and the turbocharger and all that. It'll be rocking and rolling. Then at any point, whether to attack or to defend, you hit the boost button. That allows you to start utilizing your battery, right? That 470 horsepower kicks in and boom, you take off like a rocket ship. When you reach speeds of 180 miles an hour or 290 kph, it throttles down how much battery you can deploy and it starts recharging, right? So at 180 miles an hour, the boost button starts to taper off. It becomes less strong. So there'll be tactical times when you'll want to use it and times when you won't want to use it. If you are on a quali lap or you are within a second of the car in front, right? If the car behind is within 1 second of the car in front, near the detection point, which will be the last corner of the track for all intents and purposes, there'll be a line on the ground. If a car is within a second of another car, he will enter into something called overtake mode for the entirety of the next lap. So what is the difference in overtake mode? Overtake mode is a mode that will switch on and the car will have that for the whole lap. And then when they hit their boost button, they can go all the way up to 209 miles an hour before the reduction in power begins to start taper down. So remember we talked about 180 miles per hour, the 470, the extra horsepower from the battery is going until you get to 180 and then it starts tapering down. Well, if you're in overtake mode, so you've earned that, then once you get to that next lap and you're going to be able to use overtake mode whenever you want, you're going to get more juice for longer all the way up to 209 before the battery starts self-governing and making you use less. It starts tapering down. So the idea will be the car behind will have boost in. If they're in overtake mode, they'll have boost up to 209, whereas the car in front will only have boost up to 180, and then they start tapering down. That is assuming both batteries and both cars are fully charged, which they will be in different states of charge that you'll all the time. So it's going to be a little bit confusing at first, but here's what I can tell you. They're shiny race cars. They're driving crazy fast. They're really pointy, very oversteery looking. They are nimble. They're lighter than they've been in a really long time. And all the cars are doing roughly the same pace. So it's not going to be boring. It's just going to be a little new for us to get our heads around. The 50-50 power split between the combustion engine and between the battery power engine, was that a little aggressive? Yeah, probably. Like we were at an 80-20 split last season, and we had been since 2014, essentially, right? So 80% coming from the combustion engine, 20% coming from the battery. Well, now it's 50-50. So that might have been a little much. It's not quite 50-50. It's like 55-45, but you get the idea. Almost 50-50. So would it have been better to do a 60-40 or a 65-35? Yeah, probably. That would have been the best way to do it, is let them use the battery just less reliant on the battery, maybe do a little bigger combustion engine. There's shoulda, woulda, couldas, and they may still change that next season or the season after, whatever you. But right now, we have lighter cars because they have less fuel on board. Because we have smaller batteries, they're not as big, so they run out quicker, but they're lighter. We're going to see these cars dart all around. There's going to be overtaking in weird spots. They are about 4 seconds a lap slower, from best I can tell, last season this time. Same drivers, same track, different cars, 4 seconds a lap slower than we were last year. But remember, when you switch to a new regulation set, the engineers claw that time back all season long, and they'll do it again next season. And so eventually these cars will be faster than the previous cars. So, and 4 seconds might sound like a lot, it is, but it's relative to Formula One, right? Just remember, and I'm going to get these numbers wrong, just bear with me. You can blast me in the comments. But the fastest Indy car around Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas, is something like 14 seconds a lap slower than the slowest Formula One car. Same track. So nobody would call Indy cars slow. Those are real deal OG legit BA racers. Those people are racers. They know what they're doing. They're fantastic. There's like 400 professional race car driver jobs in the world that pay really well. And like Indy, NASCAR, those are real racing seats, okay? Formula One isn't just being elitist. It's just these are the most high-paying, most difficult to acquire, the top, tippy top of the pile. So, but the Formula One cars are still, but like, going to be more than 10 seconds a lap faster than an Indy car. And no one will call an Indy car slow. I dare you to go to an Indy car race and even think that they're slow. They are crazy fast. So the Formula One cars will take a step back from where they were because they're using more battery power. And the battery is great. It's wonderfully powerful. It just runs out. It has to be recharged. And so there's a couple of different ways they can do that with regenerative braking. They can use it with clipping. They can do all these different things. And we're all going to get very familiar with how they do it. But right now, the plan is when you hit the boost button, you get your 470 additional horsepower from the battery. You take off up to 180 miles an hour, and then you start to taper down. The only time that changes is if you're within a second of the car in front, in which case you get the boost button, but it goes all the way up to 209. So you should theoretically be able to get around the car in front. If you're within a second, it should give you a distinct, your driver, the person behind, the car following, it should give them a distinct advantage. So it'll be exciting. And it's going to be exciting in Melbourne. It's going to be like just a whole new world in some ways, but in other ways, it's going to be Formula One. It's going to be great. So I'm looking forward to it. I've got some thoughts on drivers. We'll come back and do that again another time because I've got some, so I'm still putting together a little bit of information, but I really am excited for the Big Four. I think if you're a fan of Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, or Red Bull, I think you have a lot to be excited for. You're going to get to see your team compete for podiums and run around the sharp end from what it looks right now. This could all change. If you're a fan of Aston, that's tough, but the future is bright potentially. They're well resourced. They have great personnel. It's just going to take a little time for them to put it all together. And the drivers are going to make a big difference this year. It's just going to be there's a lot more to think about. And so it's hard. It's harder, maybe. That's the best way to say it. It's harder to be an F1 driver in 2026 than it was in 2025. So it'll be interesting to see how all the guys and gals of Formula One adapt and how they, these big brains, they learn and they figure out the best way. The only thing that would be bad is if they all converge on the exact same strategy, but even then, there will be differentiators. So we'll see how it goes. All right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you checking us out. My name's Sean. See you next time. Bye.